That's all she wrote for the 2025 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Atlanta Falcons take down the Saints, and the Carolina Panthers are NFC South champions. They will advance to the postseason for the first time since 2017, and the Bucs will be watching from home. Can't say anything other than they deserve this ending. But a terrible ending to the Buccaneers' 50th season. We are going to break that down, and potentially some changes looming in the offseason. A lot of questions going to be coming up here for Tampa Bay. Let's get into it.
I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Throws up with the head. Intercepted. 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
The most hilarious outcome possible for the NFC South is what ultimately takes place. The Panthers play upset, and they will take that coveted playoff spot with the division lead. The Falcons get it done in the last 2 weeks of the season, and here we are. The outcome that I think a lot of people almost saw coming. It wasn't the most likely scenario, especially before that Rams game on Monday Night Football, with Atlanta coming out on top of that one. But as soon as the Falcons beat the Rams, I think we all kind of had this growing feeling that this was going to be the most fitting end for the NFC South in 2025, and it is the end of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2025 season. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, as always, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Evan Wanish. That's all she wrote. It is finally over. We no longer have to hold on to this Todd Bowles-led Tampa Bay Buccaneers football team, and that is where a lot of the questions in today's show are going to come into play, especially with the head coach position. Todd Bowles, his future as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach, is going to be one of the hottest storylines to follow here over the next couple of weeks. A couple of other positions going to be opening up around the NFL as well, but this could very well be the end of what we would consider the Todd Bowles era in Tampa Bay, and the Bucs do it with an 8-9 regular season record. They missed the playoffs for the first time since before 2020. First time in 6 years the Bucs will not be playing in the postseason. Man, I really, the overwhelming feeling that you get right now is like this is the ending the Buccaneers deserved after that collapse here to end the season.
Yeah, I was telling you, before we went live that neither team really deserved this division, right? I mean, the winner of this division has a below 500 record, right? The Panthers are 8-9, they won the division. Neither team really deserves it. However, the Bucs deserve it much less. And I understand. I'm not going to question the players' effort, right? Like I think that obviously the effort was there, they tried, but they collapsed. It's as simple as that. 6-2 to 8-9. That's a collapse. And we'll see. Somebody has to fall on the sword for it, right? Now, whether that's Todd Bowles, we'll see. If it's not Todd Bowles, I do expect there to be other staff changes. There's been a couple questions about Josh Rezard. If they keep Bowles, I don't know if they want to do the offensive coordinator thing again. We'll see. Thomas McGaughey, the special teams coach, I wouldn't expect him to be back. And that's again, that's if they retain Bowles. But Bowles, I think it's definitely in question. And are we going to sit here and say, yep, he's definitely going to be retained, or yep, he's definitely going to be fired, or yep, he's definitely going to retire? No, we're not going to say that right now, right? Because we don't know, right? And not many. The only people that have an idea right now of what they're going to do are the Glazers. And even right now, they may take a day or two, to sort of decompress and think about it, right? Because you don't want to make a rash, choice. You don't want to make a emotional decision. You want to make a decision that you actually think is best for your team. So we'll see, but there's going to be questions, and there will be changes regardless, like whether it's Bowles or, like I said, coaches on his staff. there will be changes because it's not acceptable, right? It's simply not acceptable. And yeah, they got what they deserved. Yeah, it sucks not winning the division. I believe it would have been a franchise record, fifth straight division title. I don't believe any NFC South team has won the division 5 straight years. The Buccaneers, I think it might have been a franchise record for most consecutive playoff appearances as well for the team. So yeah, it sucks, to not get in, but we'll see what changes are made, and maybe this causes and look, there's changes on this roster as well, but that's a different show, right? We have an entire offseason to talk about the changes that the roster needs. So but it's not just the coaching staff, right? It's not like you're gonna fire Todd Bowles, you're gonna fire 3 or 4 coaches on his staff and everything's gonna be great. Like, no, they need other stuff. But yeah, I mean, yesterday's win was nice, but ultimately it didn't matter. And it didn't matter because you shot yourselves in the foot, the prior 4 weeks. And you had multiple chances to win games that you should have won. And this is what happens when you don't do that. So the Buccaneers, again, have no one to blame but themselves. And, it's look in the mirror for who did this. It's not the New Orleans Saints, right, who lost the game. No, it shouldn't have come down to that.
No, it really shouldn't have. And outside of the playoff scenario within itself, even if the Bucs had made the postseason, this is a team that for weeks now, they were cooked, right? Like, it wasn't like anyone had a strong belief that, all they got to do is get into the playoffs and then potentially they could make some noise. Like, would it have been outside of the realm of possibilities that they would win a playoff game? No, absolutely not, because it's the NFL. Everything can happen, and week to week, we talk about the parity within the NFL. Any team can beat any other team on any given day of the week. Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Thursday night, Monday night, doesn't matter when they play. It could be a Wednesday, 1 o'clock COVID game. You still have a chance of unpredictability, but this was a Bucs team that, man, even if things had worked out in their favor, like they were not going to be good enough to beat any other playoff team. It did not seem that way. And it seems like even throughout the course of the collapse, with every issue that we had seen, it's more than just the coaching, right? The quarterback play is something that we talked about. The linebackers, the lack of front seven, that's something that was going to be talked about. The offensive line, not having your guards, is going to be something that was talked about. Bucky Irving not running the ball the same way that Bucky Irving has normally run the ball is something that was going to be talked about. The offensive tendencies and the conservative coaching is something that was also going to be talked about. So, like, it was more than just Todd Bowles that factored into this Bucs collapse. But like you said earlier, someone has to fall on the sword. And I think that one of the most egregious things that we did have Todd Bowles on the hook for this 2025 season is once shit started to hit the fan, Todd chose to get up on the podium, blame the players, and then coach himself into a hole. I thought the scared coaching, the conservative coaching, even the approach that we saw against Carolina just under 24 hours ago was like, after that Baker interception, I didn't really get your thoughts on the game, so we won't get into that too much, but I do think it factors into this conversation. Like, in the second half of this season, we saw far too much conservative coaching from Todd Bowles, and you talk about shooting yourself in the foot. I think that there were just one too many times where it was apparent this guy was coaching not necessarily to win, but not to lose. And, this is a Bucs team that at times didn't even have the wherewithal to execute that good enough. It was creatively finding ways to lose, blaming your players. I don't know. And I feel more comfortable saying this because the season is over and the Bucs don't have a chance at the postseason. Like the season is in the books. I don't know how you can look at this coaching staff and not make a drastic change. It feels like, man, I said on the call-in show on Saturday, I said, I think one of the only ways that you could talk this fan base into another season of Todd Bowles is a drastically different offensive coaching staff and that one blockbuster move that everybody has been wanting, right? Like, if they go out and they trade for a Max Crosby or they get a Trey Hendrickson and they're able to, I don't want to say overhaul the linebacker position because If you go out and you get a high value target like that, you're going to be shortchanging yourself in other areas. But there are absolutely sufficient changes that can be made. So if you have like a banging defense and you feel confident about an offensive coordinator that can come in here and get the most out of Baker Mayfield, because it doesn't seem like the Bucs have a choice out of Baker next season. Maybe, but outside of that, man, I just don't know how we can look at everything that has happened this season. Look at the worst version of a Todd Bowles defense. Look at year 7, year 8.
Yes,
in a Todd Bowles
year 7.
In a Todd Bowles defensive system where your veteran players are consistently lost and don't know what their assignments are. I think there's too much from the top down to say that, this is worth rolling the dice again in 2026. I really do think it is best for this team in the long run to just rip the Band-Aid off and move on from Todd Bowles, because I'm sick of this guy.
So and I see in the chat here, Mikey B9282 says, I have a feeling we're back to having a long run of mediocre football like it was the pre-Brady era. Here's the problem. And I think this is one of the reasons why I would criticize the Glazers for keeping Todd Bowles. The pre-Brady era was not mediocre. It was bad. Like, it wasn't mediocre. From 2011 to 2019, the Buccaneers had one winning season, and it was a 9-7 year, which they missed the playoffs. That's not mediocre. That's bad. They went 7-9 twice. The rest of that were 6-10 or worse. That's bad. That's not mediocre. And I think one of the reasons why the Glazers may keep Todd Bowles is because he's safe. Your floor is probably 7 wins, but your ceiling is probably 10 wins. Like 2024, last year, probably the best it's going to get, right? As far as the regular season goes, 10-7. You got into the playoffs. Maybe you win a playoff game. Maybe you don't. I highly doubt you win 2, though, right? Like, I don't expect this team to be competing for an NFC championship with Todd Bowles as their head coach. And that's where it becomes an issue for me, right? I don't think Todd Bowles is a terrible coach. I don't think so. I think the players like playing for him. But at the same time, when does the standard change? Because it has to change eventually. The goal is to win a Super Bowl. And I just don't see what evidence is there that this is the guy that's going to be able to lead you to the Super Bowl. Could you fire Todd Bowles and you hire a first-time head coach and it flops and it's terrible and you're back in the 3-4 wins? Sure, yeah, that could absolutely happen. But the other thing could happen too, where it hits and you got a young, whether it's offensive or defensive, head coach that's going to be there a while and is building a winning culture, and you won't hit the home run if you don't swing the bat. So I think if the Glazers were to keep Todd Bowles, I think it would be a sign that they are sort of a little bit scared to go back to that time, right? Because again, you know what you're getting with Todd Bowles, right? Like you pretty much know what you're going to be getting. And the unknown is scary, but eventually you got to take that swing. And we'll see if they do. I do think it's 50-50 on whether Bowles is back. I don't think he's 100% safe. I think that's premature to call it. I think it's premature to say he's definitely gone. But we'll see. And you're not alone with being sick of, Bowles. And, there are many fans that said, and we'll see. Fans say this all the time when the stuff like this. We're like, I'm not watching a game next year. Bowles is the head coach. We'll see. A lot of them fans will probably be watching some Buccaneers football in 2026 regardless. But there's a lot of fans that are just fed up. So time will tell. And but again, there has to be some change, whether it's significant. And unfortunately for Bowles, changing the head coach is probably the biggest change you're going to be able to get, right? We talked about this. Baker Mayfield, you're not going to be able to move on from him, right? I don't think the Buccaneers want to, but even if they did want to, the contract is you might as well just let the year play out, right? Let 2026 play out. If he's good, you can extend him. If not, you can let him walk for nothing. And there's other things on this roster, but the most significant change you can make is Bowles. And I think, it might happen.
One of the things that you had said, and I think that this is important because this gets tossed around a lot. We talk about the ceiling with a Todd Bowles football team. And Todd Bowles is not a bad coach. He's just not good enough. When you start to talk about how this team is going to respond to, again, a midseason slump, which has become a bit of a staple for Todd Bowles, you would think, being a guy who has been there and done that before, he would have more answers than he presented us in 2025. When this team started to find themselves week after week coming up short, and just eventually it was like an avalanche, right? You started to see things completely fall apart there in the second half of the season. Going back to what I said before, he didn't have any answers. This did not look like a team that had any answers for where their season was headed. And that's massively concerning, again, for a guy who had been here for a number of years and a guy who had found himself in that situation time and time and time again. And I am of the belief that if the Glazers decide after watching this season that, you know what, we're content with bringing this guy back, that's disappointing on a couple of levels. Yep. It's disappointing as a fan to, one, have to watch another season of Todd Bowles, but it's also disappointing because it allows me to come up with the conclusion that we're just not serious about winning.
Correct.
That's ultimately what it comes down to, because like you said, to take a swing or to make the play, you got to swing the bat or whatever the hell you said. Like, you have to take that chance. And if there is an unproven offensive mind out there who we're going to look at a calendar year from today as here's one of the next bright young minds in the NFL, we're going to be talking about that guy the same way that everybody's talking about the Liam Cohen situation. And now the Cohen thing is different. And we've talked about that on the show before because the Bucs had every intention of bringing Cohen back. They were under the impression he was going to be back, and he chose to do what he did. That was almost out of their control, right? Sure, the Bucs could have laid everything on the table and been like, hey, we are in desperation mode. But at that point, you've already got a bad taste in your mouth from the guy lying about his kid being sick and going up to Jacksonville or whatever. So, like, I can't as much as it hurts me to see Liam Cohen
whatever.
Do what he's doing with the Jags right now, I can't entirely blame the organization for that misstep. But this season being the best chance that they have had to move on from this bum and look at a couple of options. I know the options aren't great, and like that's going to factor into the conversation too, is you can absolutely go out and you can hire the wrong guy. And there are not a great crop of coaches to pick from, but you don't know until you know. And I think that just waiting around feels like complacency. And it feels like, what is the standard if this is the guy that we are going to continue to allow to lead the charge? It does not feel like this is something that can be salvaged in a way to get my hopes back up. Man, I feel like on this podcast in 2025, I defended Todd Bowles a lot. Even last year and the year before, like I have always kind of come to the conclusion at the end of the year that like, you know what? I could talk myself into running it back with this guy. The injuries were a thing. This was a thing, yada, yada, yada. But this year, you've lost me. And it was that Atlanta game. Thursday Night Football was really when I had enough. I had enough. It was apparent that this was not going to get any better. And this team was not going to find any answers. And they were going to continue to collapse in some of the embarrassing fashions they did in the second half of the season. It was just once you have successfully found new ways to lose in ways that we hadn't seen before, like that was the sign to me that, all right, this thing is done. Let's pack it in. Let's go ahead and move on. And again, that's where I find myself right now. He's not a bad coach, but we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. With everything that we have and the track record we've been given, the best case scenario with Todd Bowles as your head coach is you struggle to reach 11 wins. Maybe you win the NFC South if it's not that competitive of a division. And if you're a good enough offense, your offensive coordinator is going to be plucked to be a head coach somewhere. I would rather take the chance to bring in our own offensive head coach and just not have to deal with that trivial BS year in and year out. Because when you look at the state of the NFL, Evan, we could even do an exercise right now if we wanted to. If you look at the playoff teams in the NFC and AFC, and you compare offensive head coach versus defensive head coach, I think it's going to be an overwhelming percentage one way or the other. And
Yeah.
I truly think that even if it's not an offensive head coach, having a young, talented play designer who can get the most, not just a play caller, but a guy who can design plays, someone who can get the most out of your quarterback and your offense, that's the key to success in the NFL. I think we are far beyond the days of defense wins championships, because as much as I like that old school mentality and as much as I like some of the historic defenses we have seen, especially in Tampa Bay, like that was the anchor of the 0-2 Super Bowl team. But times are changing, my friend, and I don't think I don't think I want to continue to live in a world where the best we're ever going to get with Todd Bowles is a 11-win season where nothing feels easy and our offensive coordinator is going to be somebody else's head coach. I think it's time to rip the Band-Aid off. And, they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And if they bring back Todd Bowles, it's exactly what it's going to feel like to me.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. $2 super chat from Rich Rupert, 365.
Let's go, Rich.
Thank you very much.
First
Said
one of the
this,
offseason.
yeah. How about that? First off-season pod, huh?
Yeah.
Many more to come. This elimination is the silver lining we need, and you're probably not alone in that feeling, right? Like, and look, if it's a catalyst for change, whether it's coaching staff or roster, like, this roster needs some work, right? It's obvious. It's not all on Todd Bowles. Like he pinned it on the players, and like, should he have said it? Maybe not, but like, he's partially right, right? Like, he
Sure.
can't go out there and make tackles or blow coverage assignments, or he is partially right, because it's not all, we talk about that all the time, right? It's not just, it's execution on everybody's part. The coaches got to put the players in the best positions to be possible. But it doesn't matter if the players don't execute. Like, the players have to play well. There's nothing the coaches can do about that. So, and the Bucs are lacking talent in some important areas, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, which is probably what Bowles will bring up, right? Because he's going to have a case, to a chance to just make his case or state his case to keep his job, right? And we'll see if he can. And I do think there's going to be some. They're going to want changes, right? Like the Glazers. And I think it might depend on how many changes they want versus how many Bowles is comfortable with, right? If it's something like, if we get to something like, oh, they want Bowles to give up defensive play calling, I don't think Bowles is back. I think Bowles would rather not be the head coach. I don't think he wants to be just like a manager, basically, where you have a defensive coordinator calling the plays and an offensive coordinator, and Bowles is kind of just like, the middleman, basically. I don't think he wants that. So we'll see. But I mean, it's tough, right? And look, guys, like, there's a lot of talk of like Baker Mayfield in the chat. Like, Baker Mayfield's not going anywhere. That's one change that won't happen, whether you like it or not. He's going to be the Buccaneers quarterback in 2026. The other thing is, Corey Fleming asked in the chat, if Harbaugh or Tomlin become available, do you think the Glazers change their tune on keeping Bowles? What would you do? Well, for one, I don't think the Glazers have decided to keep Todd Bowles. I don't think that's been decided yet, so we'll see. I would personally probably pass on both. I'd be more open to Harbaugh than I would be to Tomlin. Tomlin is very much like Todd Bowles. And Pittsburgh fans want, I mean, honestly, both fan bases, right? Baltimore fans and Pittsburgh fans are kind of sick of those guys. But yeah, Tomlin, I think Bucs fans would realize pretty quickly that, yeah, Tomlin is not, he's not a bad coach. He's a good coach. But you want to talk about being frustrated with, being conservative and stuff like that. Like, Tomlin would not be exactly, what they're looking for. So, but yeah, I mean, if you look at what the Glazers have done, right, historically, John Gruden, 9-3. They lose the final 4 games of the season. They finish 9-7. They fire John Gruden. Raheem Morris, they start 4-2. And obviously this is a big one, but they lose 10 straight and finish 4-12. Okay. Greg Schiano, first year was solid, then second year went off the rails. Their collapse was kind of in the beginning, right? They started 0-8. And then they went 4-4 down the stretch to finish 4-12. Schiano was fired. Lovie Smith, the Buccaneers were 6-6 in Lovie Smith's second season. In contention for a wild card spot, not necessarily, there, but in contention for a spot. And they lost the final 4 games of the season, and Smith was fired. This, to me, and also an important note, Scott Reynolds actually, I think, noted this in one of his articles recently at Pew Report, that both Schiano and Mark Dominic were told a week before the season ended that they were both safe, and then they were fired 2 weeks later. So, just because you hear reports of a guy being safe doesn't mean much. Jay Glazer, also of Fox Sports today, said that, time will tell. He put Bowles in the time will tell category, not the exact safe category. So that's why I still think it is up in the air. So we'll have to wait and see. But the point is that the Glazers don't typically accept collapses, right? That's not something that they like, especially when you're in a playoff spot. During the Raise the Flags documentary, which I admit I got a late start on. I'm in the middle of it right now, but they were talking about right after the Glazers had bought the team, and it was, what was that, 96, right? And they said about how, well, their season, right? I forget what they started, 5-2 or something like that, and they finished 7-9. And the Glazers said, well, we had to fire Sam Weish. Like, we did. Like, they started 5-2 and they ended 7-9, and they just had to fire him. And I understand that, Bowles has had more success, in his tenure than Sam Weiss did in his. Like, I get that. It's different situations. But again, the Glazers typically do not love collapses. And this is a collapse. And we'll see what happens. Yeah. Yeah. So, and also, Sal in the chat said, how many head coach mulligans does Jason get? You've had 4 tries. He's not had 4 tries. If you are counting, I guess, if you're counting Lovie Smith was hired before Jason Light was hired, so that does not count as a head coaching candidate. I guess you were ignoring that Bruce Arians won a Super Bowl. I guess that doesn't count, I guess. I don't know. That's weird. Why he would consider like the Arians hire a failure. But the Cutter thing, think that was more of a kind of like a shoe-in, like, yeah, you pretty much, like, they were going to conduct the search, but once Lovie was fired, you pretty much knew, like, yeah, Cutter's going to be in the driver's seat for this thing. And Arians, it was, like, pretty clear, like, once Cutter was fired, that, yeah, Arians is probably going to be the next guy. And then Bowles was handpicked by Arians in late March. So Jason Light did not hire. Jason Light's only probably really hired, I don't know, maybe one of those coaches. So this would be the first time that Jason would have to really go outside the organization and do his own search. So I'd be pretty intrigued by that. So you say he's had 4 tries, but in reality, it's kind of been a weird situation where he really hasn't, because, like I said, one coach was hired before he was, and one coach was handpicked by the current former head coach. And he didn't really get much of a chance there. So, and Jason Light needs to be better. And again, we'll talk about the roster some other time. But to say that, how many mulligans does he need, that's not exactly accurate.
Well, and I think it's a tough situation too, and I know you kind of mentioned it as well, but Bowles even being here in the first place was Bruce Arians on the way out making sure that Todd Bowles was the guy. And if as much as I love Bruce, man, I'm curious where this team would be if that wasn't the order of operation at the end of the day. But one of the other things I wanted to ask you about here as we continue to move on, it has been announced that there will be a chance for Todd Bowles to talk to the media. He will take the podium at 3:30 p.m. on Monday. It'll be an open locker room at noon, and players cleaning their things out will have a chance to give some closing statements on the season. So curious to hear who we're going to hear from. Some free agents going to be on that list as well. We'll talk about that eventually. But I want to ask you about some of the candidates. And I don't know if this is putting all of our eggs into one basket, because we just talked about Todd Bowles getting a chance to talk to the media tomorrow. I can't assume that a decision is going to be made between now and 3 p.m. on Monday, given that Bowles will at least have a chance.
Also, I mean, if something changes, you can just cancel the press conference.
Sure. Yeah, sure. But when you look at potential head coach candidates, it certainly does feel like a very rough season. And we get a $2 super chat here from Mr. Bucs Nation. He says, well, look who's streaming. I'm surprised he's not. I'm surprised he didn't do a live watch party for the Falcons Saints game, to be honest with you. He should have been live throughout.
True. And I mean, even like Greg Allman even notes a little bit, he said, barring any major announcement, media will have access to Bowles and Bucs players on Mondays to clear out lockers for the offseason. So
fair enough.
Again, yeah, we'll see.
But let me ask you about this crop of candidates here, because there's a couple of guys that people have already started talking about. Clint Kubiak, the offensive coordinator in Seattle, who I don't necessarily love. But both of the offensive and defensive coordinators for the LA Rams, Grant Udinski, the young offensive coordinator for the Jaguars, that's a huge swing. But he is a guy who may or may not have some interest from other teams around the league. Kevin Stefanski reportedly on his way out of Cleveland. I think that's going to be interesting. And another thing that popped up this morning on the Fox pregame show with Jay Glazer, he said that Coach Matt LaFleur and the Packers, it is not a foregone conclusion. This is weird, but this is one of those things where I swear on my life, if Matt LaFleur is an option and we decide to hang on to Todd Bowles,
you fired Todd Bowles.
Oh, brother. So let me get your thoughts here. There's a couple of other situations we could spend some time and theorize about, but when you look at the crop of incoming candidates here, is there anyone that you favor over the other? Like, who would you say is at the top of your list here as far as replacing Todd Bowles?
I to be honest with you, I don't want to get too much into it, because I think it's kind of, if he's officially gone, we'll get more into it. A lot of the names you mentioned are going to be the names, right? I like Kubiak a little bit more than you do. I think that Udinski's probably a little too green for me. I am intrigued, but like, I don't know, he said this is his first year as an offensive coordinator. He's 30 years old. Like, it'd be a swing. I mean, that's for sure. But I'm not 100% sure on that one. Chris Shula, obviously the Rams, but he's a defensive guy. But I will say, like, that doesn't mean it can't work, right? Mike McDonald and the Seahawks have the number one seed in the NFC right now, right? D'Amico Ryans and the Texans, they're going to the playoffs. Like, just because it can work, right? Jesse Minter, Chargers defensive coordinator as well. It seems like Stefanski is on his way out from Cleveland. I would have some interest in Kevin Stefanski. I don't know. Now, the interesting thing with Stefanski, though, I don't know how the relationship is with Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
That I don't know. Obviously, Baker's exit from Cleveland was pretty ugly, but I'm not sure how it was, with the head coach. So I think that might have been more of a front office and ownership deal with Mayfield there than Stefanski. But I would give him a look as well. And then obviously, Matt LaFleur. But the tough thing about that is I'm sure there are other teams that maybe are on the fence about keeping their coach or not that would also fire their head coach in order to get Matt LaFleur. So it wouldn't just be the Buccaneers. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
Let me ask you about one more hypothetical here when it comes to coaches. We don't often see trades for coaches in the NFL. Again, I think the last one we saw was when Denver traded to get Sean Payton, and his rights. But do you think there is a sense of urgency among the Bucs front office to not necessarily take what has been given to them in terms of head coaching candidates? Like, do you think there is a possibility where, let's say they want to get aggressive and just trade for like a Kevin O'Donnell, yeah.
Kevin O'Connell, yeah.
Thank you. He's not had the best year in Minnesota. You could look at quarterback play as a huge part of that. But, I mean, last year they were a team that was playing for the 1 seed in the NFC. So this is a guy who can win you football games. He's a young offensive-minded head coach. Like, that is one of those things that if they really wanted to pull the trigger, I wouldn't be upset. But does that also set a precedent of, you're putting more resources into going and getting a coach that would maybe leave you out of the running for a guy like Max Crosby or so on and so forth? Like, what are your thoughts on getting a little bit more aggressive in a coach search?
Yeah, I mean, they're just so rare, and like if you look at the coaching trades, right? Like, yeah, the Buccaneers have made two of them, right? Like, and they won Super Bowls each time because technically they did trade for Arians. But when you look at it, right, Arians was traded for, but he wasn't coaching, right? Sean Payton was traded for, but he wasn't coaching. He had stepped away. He was in the broadcast booth. So those are rare when you actually see a coach get traded that's actively still coaching. So I'm not banking on it. It would be costly. It would be at least, a first round pick. I think that Denver gave a first round pick and then a little bit extra. Obviously the Broncos have been great this year, right? So like it's worked so far for them, but I'm not sure if the Buccaneers are in that position. And I'm also not sure, like I like Kevin O'Connell, but I'm not sure if I like him enough to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a fun exercise just because it doesn't really happen. But I don't really foresee that foresee that happening. Especially because again, like you're depriving yourself of draft assets that you're either going to need for whether it be a trade or just simply to use, because like you're going to have, this is going to be the highest draft pick the Buccaneers have had since they drafted Tristan Wirfs.
So let's talk about a more uncomfortable situation, and that is the possibility that the Bucs retain Todd Bowles.
Mm-hmm. Which is a real possibility, but yeah.
It is. I don't know how sure of a possibility it is. I know that there have been some reports, a lot of, PR puff, if you will, indicating that the Bucs don't necessarily want to move on from Todd Bowles. So that makes me think a couple things. One of them is like, this is setting up for him to retire, right? And these are reports that reinforce the idea that like, oh, the Bucs didn't want to fire him. He just retired and it's time, blah, blah, blah. That's a real possibility. But on the other side of that, if Todd Bowles survives this 2025 season, you have to look at a couple of things that we've already talked about. Like, I'm assuming that there isn't another candidate out there that the front office and ultimately the Glaziers are going to feel is a better option than Todd Bowles. But outside of that, when you look at that scenario, what else has to factor into that? Because like Josh Grizzard can't be back as your offensive coordinator. McGahee can't be back as your special teams coordinator. And maybe Todd Bowles is relegated to a different position as far as how he oversees the defense. Like what kind of changes do you think would be made? And even from a roster construction point, if you want to get into that, what kind of changes do you think would happen if Bowles is ultimately back? Because if he is back, it's going to look much different than it does now.
Yeah, there's going to be changes. So, like, there will be changes regardless of if Bowles is back or not. Obviously, if Bowles isn't back, there's a whole bunch of changes. But like, this is not going to be the same exact coaching staff in 2026. It will not be. Thomas McGahee, however you pronounce, he's gone. I would be stunned if he is back. Josh Grizzard, I'm kind of 50-50 on. I think them getting healthy towards the end of the season and still not looking great hurts him, because I think you could have played he just didn't have the dudes, right? Like, he just did not have the weapons. And I think also the tough thing for Grizzard is it's a way for Bowles to say, well, if I just get a different OC and nail the OC higher, then things will be better, right? That's something that Bowles can kind of say, like, yeah, like, this is a significant thing that I can do. About the defensive thing of like Todd Bowles' role as far as that, I think if they want him to not be the defensive play caller, I think that's where he'd say, well, I'm just going to step down. I do not see a world where Todd Bowles is the head coach of this team and is not the defensive play caller. And even if he isn't, let's say he does. Let's say he's like, you know what? It's a good idea. I'm going to hire a DC. What if the defense struggles 5 or 6 games into the season, and the Bucs are 2-4? Does Todd Bowles just take the defensive play calls back? Like, and also you're still gonna be running a version of his defense. It's not like this defensive coordinator is gonna be like just completely running his own thing. Like Bowles is gonna have a say in what it is, right? So that's another thing where I'm like, I don't really foresee that. So I guess the most significant change would be like Josh Rezard. But again, on the other hand, you really want to have Baker Mayfield with another offensive coordinator again? Like, I mean, at what point do you want some continuity here, right? I understand that Grizzard wasn't great, but at what point do you say, like, he just give him another shot, right? So, um, we'll see what happens there. I do expect, Tom Zagagi gone. I also think on the defensive staff, guys like Nick Rapone, safeties coach, Kevin Ross, the cornerbacks coach, could see both of them leave. Maybe a George Edwards as well. You could see those types of things if Bowles is retained. But yeah, there's going to be changes regardless, whether Bowles is back or not, because there's no way that they're going to be running the same staff back.
I want to end the show on a positive note here, and I want to talk about one of the greatest Tampa Bay Buccaneer players to ever put on the red computer. That is number 54, Lavonte David, who, as of right now, there has been no official announcement, and he said at the podium that he hasn't made up his mind yet one way or the other, but it largely feels like this may have been his last season, and that win against Carolina may have been his final game in the Bucs uniform. In that game, he ties Derrick Brooks for the most tackles by a player in franchise history, which is incredibly fitting to see 54 and 55 at the top of the mountain, two of the greatest linebackers in Bucs history. Do you think 54 is going to call it a career? I think some of the shortcomings that we have talked about over the course of the season may factor into that conversation, but regardless of everything we've seen this season, he is a guy who no doubt deserves his flowers.
Yeah, I would expect Lavonte David to hang it up. You just watch that the Buccaneers post on their social media the post game locker room like speech that Lavonte gave, and if that doesn't tell you all you need to know, I don't know what else will, to be honest with you. So, I expect Lavonte David to retire, and what a career, right? Really one of the first, because like people watching the growing up, oh, I watched Rondé Barber's whole career, or I watched Warren Sapp's whole career, Derrick Brooks' whole career. Really, the first guy that I watched get drafted and then play his entire career and watched all of it and then see him retire. Like really like the first guy, right? It was like, yeah, sure, like Gerald McCoy, but like by the time I really started to watch football, McCoy was already on the team. Like that doesn't really count. Like Tom Brady. Tom Brady was playing football for 15 years before I started watching, like before I started watching football. So like that's not the same, right? So I think like Lavonte David, like assuming he does retire, it's gonna be like the first guy where like I saw him get drafted and then I watched every game and then you see all those years with him, right? It's 14 years. And then it's over, right? And one hell of a career. And yeah, I mean, it's was the last 2 years the same? No, but like you think you didn't take these last 2 years for granted, right? Because you kind of never knew. And honestly, I expected it to be last year. I expected it to be last year. But fortunately, he was able to come back. And this year, though, it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. So I think his family was in a suite, right? That's another sign.
Yeah.
I don't expect Lavonte to get back. So one heck of a career, an all-time Buck. His name will be up in the stadium. His number might end up being retired. Who knows? Should be a Hall of Famer. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to get there. But he deserves to be. And at least he was able to go out with a win. It does suck that like you didn't know like 100% that was his last game.
Yeah.
But at least he did go out on a high note.
It should be a Hall of Famer, and I think it's going to be one of those things where like I think he'll get in eventually. I think he's probably going to have to wait
Yeah.
a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah. And
He'll
then Richard T also mentions Evan, you can say that about Will Golston, see him get drafted and retire. Yeah, but I'm talking about like franchise icons.
Yeah,
Like
like Will Golston, he had a bit of a second wind when the Bucs kicked him over to an interior lineman, but I remember for the longest time, like they wanted him to be they were still playing in that 4-3 defense and they wanted him to be a defensive end and like he just wasn't good for a little while. With all due respect to Big Will, happy to
yeah.
see him play his entire career in Tampa Bay as well. He gets that coveted Super Bowl title with Tom Brady and all the other guys in Super Bowl 55. So I'm glad that they were a part of that. I'm glad that we got to witness so many great years of football from Levante David. Should absolutely be a Hall of Famer. We will just have to wait and see when that inevitably happens.
And also really quick note, just to get it, I don't expect Mike Evans to retire. Because I know there's been like, oh, this could be Mike Evans' last game as well. I expect him to be back. Will I be stunned if he retires? No, but if I had to choose, if you were asking my opinion, I do expect Mike Evans to be back with the Buccaneers, at least for one more season.
He just, man, like I remember we made the argument about Brady. Even as miserable as he had looked in that 2022 season, it was apparent he had some juice. I think when you look at Mike Evans still getting the level of separation that he has and
It's
just
still there.
playing, it's still there, man. He still looks like big number 13 out there. And it's disappointing that the 1,000-yard streak is going to come to an end this year.
That's another reason why I think he might come back. If he had
Yeah.
gotten 1,000 yards this year and it would have been the record, I think he might have been done. But I think he sort of wants to prove that, like, yeah, like the only reason he didn't get it was because he got hurt. That's
Yeah.
it. Like, I think he wants to end on 1,000 yards.
And I mean, think of the marketing value in 13 for 13, 13 seasons for big
Yeah.
number 13. That's a lot of t-shirts, man. And
Mhm.
that's going to make somebody a decent amount of money. Looking ahead to Bucs free agency, we're not going to break all of this down, but I just want to throw the list out there to everybody, and you can churn on it a little bit. The biggest names on the list: Mike Evans, Levante David, who we both just talked about, Jamel Dean, Cade Otton, Rashad White, Logan Hall, Hassan Reddick, Greg Gaines, Sterling Shepard, Co Kieft, Charlie Heck, Kendall Vildor, Teddy Bridgewater, Deion Jones, Mike Jordan, JT Gray, Dan Feeney, Anthony Walker. The Bucs also have 3 restricted free agents not likely to be tendered, so they will become unrestricted free agents, being running back Sean Tucker, defensive back Christian Izien, and outside linebacker Marquise Watts. Punter
Although
Riley
I
Dixon.
would expect Tucker, and I think they're going to try to get Izzy back as well.
Yeah, I think Tucker and Izien are going to be some guys that they want back. Punter Riley Dixon is a team option for 2026 at $3 million. He had an up and down season. Curious to see what kind of changes they make there, because special teams was just abysmal. I mean, it was so bad, not mostly in part due to Riley Dixon, but like it was so bad that Todd Bowles admitted a couple of weeks ago that they have just completely given up on kick coverage. That should tell you how things are.
They were told to always kick it out of the back of the end zone. Never. They do not want them returning it because they can't cover. Really quick.
Yeah.
One note on Rashad White. Do not expect him to be back. But also, that's just opinion, but also Rashad White seemingly confirming his exit, posted on his Instagram story. Uno out. Thank you forever for the past 4 years. So, sure seems like a guy who does not expect to be back, which is another reason why I think they're going to keep Sean Tucker. I think it's probably one or the other, and I think Rashad White's going to try and go to a place where he can get a bigger opportunity. I think you realize that Bucky Irving's probably going to be the guy here. So yeah, Rashad White, solid player, and yeah, he will not be back. And honestly, I think most of those guys won't be back. Like Sterling Shepard probably going to probably retire. Like we talked about Levante David, a lot of those guys again, like Cade Otton, I really don't know. That's a tricky one. I'm sure Cade Otton's agent will be back. Just look at the last game. But we'll see. But I do expect a lot of changes to both this coaching staff and this team in this offseason. So really quick though, before we do end, I want to thank all you guys. The 2025-26 season come to an end. Which comes to an end of our coverage for the 2025-2026 season. And thank you all for tuning in to every post-game show, every game preview, every betting the Bucs, every players to watch, no matter what it was, right? You guys showed us support throughout the entire year, the ups and downs, which obviously, there are a lot of them. And, disappointing, obviously, that we're not talking about a playoff game, but we're going to have a ton of off-season content for you guys. And, I'm sure there's going to be some news over the next week or so. So you're not, it won't be long until you hear from us again. So it could even be tomorrow. So we'll see.
And I think we want to send some extra thanks out for hanging with us throughout this season in particular. I truly believe that this season, more than any season we've ever covered, has just found a way to get under everybody's skin. And it is probably, from top to bottom, the most disappointing season we have ever covered here on the show. Because normally, like when we started all the way back in 2016, the Bucs were a bad football team, and that was to be expected. They never started 6-2. And then just collapsed down the stretch. Like, they were pretty consistently bad. We had our fair share of losing streaks. You had a lot of 3, 4, 5 interception afternoons. You kind of had a more branded identity as like lovable losers. And then the Tom Brady era happens, and people can say that we're spoiled. Whatever, man. I'm forever grateful that we got to cover a Super Bowl season here on this little rinky-dink podcast. But now it feels like a major tipping point, and it does feel like the ball is in the Glazers' court, if you will, that could ultimately determine how this franchise is going to look over the next 3 to 5 years. I think we are walking a fine line between still being a competitive football team come November and December, or fully rebuilding this thing and embracing what will be a new era of Tampa Bay Buccaneers football. And it's a scary thought. It really is. And it's even scarier to think of the possibility that the Glazers just accept mediocrity and bring back our boy, because then it's like, what really changes?
We'll talk about that if it happens, right? Like, we will, if it's clear that Todd Bowles is back, like, we'll talk about it. And
yeah, man,
we'll see. We'll see. All I know is that nothing's definite. It's not. I truly believe it is not definite that he is back, and it is also not definite that he is fired. So we will see.
Oh, buddy. That's just about going to do it for today's episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I want to thank everybody again for hanging out with us over the course of the season, and even today, unprompted, just jumped on here and had well over 100 people in our live chat. That is truly what it's all about. Subscribe to the channel for more great Buccaneers content if you haven't already, and check out the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. You can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL, and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. You got anything in the hopper here to wrap up the season?
Well, I did have my article drop about the Buccaneers needing change. So check that out on BucsNation.com. I'm just sort of looking at some stuff about Bowles and stuff. It was posted before this weekend, so a little bit outdated at this point. But look, if the Buccaneers make a change, I'll probably have an article with some candidates potentially. Might even make a short video on here. We'll obviously have a podcast talking about it as well, so I'll have plenty of coverage there. And then also, like, let's say they keep Bowles, but there's other staff changes, right? We'll be there to talk about them as well. So plenty of coverage on BucsNation.com and on the Cannonfire Podcast. Just because it's the off season, we're not going away just yet. Usually, our break time is like May-ish, June-ish, but there's still plenty to talk about over the next coming weeks and months. So it may be maybe some less shows, right? Like less shows per month, but we'll still be here to break it all down.
Last but not least, you can find myself Instagram and Twitter at Rhettakus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. And please check out the Rondé Barber Show. We still have a few more episodes of season 1 all the way up until the Super Bowl. So excited to hear his insight and really excited to hear his thoughts on where this Bucs team is ultimately going to end up. New episodes drop every single Wednesday. You can find it with video on YouTube and any other podcast platform that is the Rondé Barber Show. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off for my co-host, Evan Wanish, for one final time in the 2025 season. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you in the next one. Until then, and as always, go Bucs.